Now I understand that Senator Black and Senator Éireann are sharing time 6 and 2. Is that correct?
5 and 3.
5 and 3. Is that agreed? Thank you. Senator Black, 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm a little bit nervous because I'm told that the whole of Palestine are watching here today, so you can imagine I'm a little bit anxious, and I just want to make sure that I get everything in I need to get in, and I will try and do that. Last night I welcomed 2 amazing Palestinian farmers to Dublin. Mona and Fayez travelled all the way from the West Bank to be here to meet with ordinary Irish people, groups that have been fundraising, holding public meetings and sending support. They're watching from the gallery today, and I want to extend a sincere welcome to them on what I hope will be a historic occasion. They've been living in the shadow of Israel's illegal annexation wall since 2003, fighting against the demolition of their home and the confiscation of their land. The wall has quite literally cut their farm in half, and the impact it has had on their family is absolutely devastating. Sadly, their story is not unique. It is repeatedly endless across the West Bank, where over 42% of the land has now been confiscated, seriously undermining the viability of a sustainable Palestinian state. Though these settlements are repeatedly condemned as illegal by the EU, UN and Irish government, they continue to extract valuable natural resources and agricultural produce. These goods are then exported and sold on shelves around the world, including in Ireland, to pay for occupation. There is a clear hypocrisy here. How can we condemn the settlements as illegal, as theft of land and resources, but then happily buy the proceeds of this crime? We must be clear on this. Israeli settlements in the West Bank are war crimes. This is what we're dealing with, and I'm amazed at how relaxed people can be about it, as if trading in the proceeds of war crimes is not a big deal. For a country that prides itself on upholding humanitarian principles and international law, this is unacceptable, and I believe it's time we stood clearly against this injustice. I've had long conversations with you, Taoiseach, on this. I know your passion and commitment, and I recognise so much, I respect you so much, and I do recognise the great work that you're doing, but I fundamentally disagree that the current policy is working. For 25 years, Ireland and the EU have issued statement after statement of condemnation, but settlement expansion has continued. More homes are being demolished, and it's getting to the point now there will soon be no Palestine left to recognise. Ultimately, as long as the settlements stay profitable, as long as we buy their stolen goods, nothing will change. Ireland has the opportunity to take lead on this, to make a clear principled case, grounded on international law, that other states will follow. We are not looking to go it alone, we are looking to lead. This is not a radical demand. We're simply asking for consistency in our foreign policy and disassociation from clear violations of international law. The bill will not end trade in Israeli produce, and I need to say that again. It will not end trade in Israeli produce, only goods produced in the settlements beyond its borders. This is not BDS, long condemned by Ireland and its EU partners as illegal. This distinction is crucially important, and I've listened to the argument that as an EU member state we cannot change trade policy unilaterally, but I strongly disagree. The legal basis of the bill is outlined in great detail in the legal opinions I have shared with colleagues across this House. They are written by Michael Lynn, Senior Counsel here in Ireland, and James Crawford, Professor of International Law at Cambridge University and a sitting judge at the International Court of Justice. The government may disagree, but these are some of the most eminent, authoritative legal scholars in Ireland and the world. Their input carries weight, and I would also thank Senator Michael McDowell himself, a former Attorney General of this country, for offering his legal support of the bill. It means so much. The fundamental argument offered by Crawford and others is clear. Ireland is entitled under Article 36 of the treaties to end its support to what the EU itself says are violations of international law. Our capacity to take this measure rests precisely on the overwhelming consensus that the settlements are illegal. Article 36 can be read narrowly, but cases like this are exactly why it exists. For limited proportional restrictions on trade justified on the basis of our other obligations, such as upholding and respecting international humanitarian law and human rights. I disagree on concerns over enforcement. Under the Public Health Alcohol Bill, for example, bottles will only be imported and sold into Ireland from other EU states if they display government-mandated health warnings, another modest proportional restriction that does not require extensive custom checks but simple instructions that our supermarkets and businesses can follow. The same applies here. I'm limited on time, Cathaoirleach, so I close by saying that this is a modest proposal. It is not sanctions on any one country. It is not ending diplomatic ties. It's simply saying that if we are sure certain goods have been produced as a result of war crimes, we should not be trading in them. To me, this is the bare minimum that should be expected of an EU member state and a country committed to justice and human rights. I urge my colleagues to reaffirm that commitment with me today.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Éireann.
As my time is brief, I'll get straight to the point. In terms of the subject matter we are debating here today, we should point out that we actually have a remarkable level of consensus in this chamber. There is a broad consensus that the Israeli settlements in the West Bank are illegal. In the words of Minister Coveney from our January debate, the relentless expansion of Israeli settlements on Palestinian territory is unjust, provocative and undermines the credibility of Israel's commitment to a peaceful solution to a conflict to which we all want an end. There is also a broad consensus that Ireland should act to intervene, and indeed, considering our own historical experience, that we have a moral obligation to do so. We now have a majority support in the withdrawal of economic support to goods and services originating in occupied territories as a means by which we vindicate our commitments under international law. So if we have consensus on the principles behind the bill, the aims of the bill and means by which to achieve those aims, it's important to note and consider that. It seems, therefore, the main point of contention left is the compatibility of the bill with our trade policies and the EU single market. The Government contends that trade is an exclusive EU competence and Member States have no latitude to act unilaterally. We contend that the public policy exemption in Article 36 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU makes this bill legal. As this bill is justifiable on public morality grounds, a view supported by several eminent legal scholars. The Government counterclaims this exemption has been interpreted narrowly by the European Court of Justice and that this bill would not stand. In response to that, I would personally be proud to see Ireland move to becoming a leader on using trade policy as a tool to defend morality and human rights within the single market. That's what this bill could represent. The Minister has said that Ireland cannot go it alone on this issue, that we need an EU-wide effort. This in fact could be what jump-starts that EU-wide effort. We may be the first to use the public policy exemption to stand up for the rights of the people of Palestine, but I can guarantee we would not be the last, as we would be setting an example and one that could be followed. At a time when Ireland too often hits the headlines for falling foul of EU law and initiatives in negative terms, whether that be failing climate change targets or illegal state aid in the Apple tax case, this is our chance to push the boat out and lead Europe in standing up for occupied territories, the people of Palestine and international human rights law. Why should we only look to push EU legal boundaries in support of corporations and tax avoidance and not the rights of oppressed people in desperate need of our support and solidarity? Today we can set an example and blaze a trail that other EU states can follow, where Ireland took an intimidating but bold first step. I hope, the Minister, that is something you consider as this bill moves through the Houses of the Oireachtas. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Higgins, your 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm very strongly in support of the bill. I'm very proud to be a co-signer and supporter of this bill. Others in this House, I just want to use my couple of minutes, and I know others may wish to indicate, but to address a couple of issues that have arisen. Others spoke about the apartheid situation in South Africa and the analogies there. And just to be clear, that was not simply a boycott of the people. It was led by the people. The demand was made by the people, but it was then action that was taken by the state. And it was important action was taken by the state. And I've looked back to some of the debates at the time, and it's remarkable how similar the arguments that were made. Our membership of the EEA, concerns about inadvertent consequences for commerce and business, very similar language. So let's be clear on trade, and trade is an issue on which I have a strong interest and record in examining. This bill doesn't impact on international trade law. We have the very eminent opinions that have been cited by my colleague, Senator Black. But to be very clear, World Trade Organization rules apply only to recognised territories. They do not apply to organised territories. EU free trade agreements, which have been signed, are very clear and explicitly exclude goods from settlements within EU trade agreements. They are not included in free trade agreements, and Europe has been clear it does not have a free trade agreement which encompasses goods from occupied territories. Article 36 of the functioning of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, a core document, has been clear that there are exceptions on the collective rules of trade, where they can be justified on grounds of public morality, public policy, public security, and the protection of health and the life of humans. I don't think there is anyone who would argue that the situation which we have seen unfold, documented by so many bodies again and again and again, are in danger, and that action is needed in order to protect the health and the life of humans in this regard, as well as looking to issues of public morality and public policy. So in this regard, we know that there's precedent. We're not on our own. Germany has exercised the right to exceptions under Article 36. It is a standard practice. It's there for a reason, and it's there to be used, and I cannot think of a better use of it than this. Minister, you spoke about not wanting to take a different position from others in Europe or in the world. We are taking, this was a quote from the speech. You talked about we don't want to take a different position. We are taking the same position that the United Nations has taken, and indeed a position that many in Europe has taken. However, we are going to take that position, I hope, seriously. We take the position and we stand by the position. That is what is important. And if we are passionate about multilateralism and serious about multilateralism, we must let it be our guide. This is not about Ireland being a voice in the wilderness, but Ireland being a voice against the wilderness and against the idea that we must bow to big powers. Yes, we must work with others, and our diplomacy is crucial, and conversations, and everybody wants to see Ireland using its soft power of diplomacy, but part of using that is being willing to recognise that part of diplomacy is taking international law seriously, taking appropriate diplomatic measures such as this to address it, and recognising we don't want to have to wait for Washington to be on board, because we will be waiting a while. We need to have instead our guide from the UN Human Rights Council, where unfortunately Washington has chosen to leave that council. The UN Human Rights Council, which in the legal opinions that my colleague Senator Black has shared, has been very clear on our responsibilities, and Ireland, in terms of the Human Rights Council, needs to be serious on that. And if we want to be taken seriously for the UN Security Council, we also need to show that we take UN rules and mandates and international law very seriously. This is a thoughtful bill. It sets as its bar the International Court of Justice, the highest arbiter of law that we have internationally.
Thank you, Senator.
And that will be of importance. I have to say finally, which is there are other countries, such as Western Papua, who have sought to be recognised as occupied territories in relation to it, and it may have implications in the future for them also. Thank you.
Senator. Senator Keller then has 3 minutes left. Have the shared slot.
Thank you. I wish to share 2 and 2 with me and Alice Mary. And
Senator Keller, right.
I'd like to welcome the Taoiseach and the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Simon Coveney, to this House again, and I would like once again to add my voice to those of my colleagues in support of Senator Francis Black's Private Members Bill, which I was very honoured to co-sign, seeking to prohibit the sale of Israeli settlement goods in Ireland. I would also like to take this opportunity to yet again condemn the actions of the Israeli Defence Forces against unnamed protesters, and condemn the dramatic rise in the use of administrative detention, which could be known more commonly as political internment. We've watched in horror as the events of the past weeks, the past months, the past years have unfolded on our TV screens, on our tablets. We've seen the most desperate and brutal violations of people's right to protest against injustice, against occupation, against the taking of the very ground from under people. We have seen the most reprehensible form of crackdown imaginable: placards, flags and stones met with tear gas, with live gunfire and shelling. And basically, the status quo has failed. The delusion that Israel is fully committed to a two-state solution is very, very questionable. Justice and peace for the Palestinian people has not been delivered. It has failed the well over 100 Palestinians shot dead in recent months. It has failed over 10,000 Palestinians wounded in protests. It has failed the 4.3 million Palestinians refugees registered with UNRWA. No new refugee crisis. This has gone on since 1948. People are stranded for decades in camps that I saw for myself in Lebanon, in the Bekaa Valley. This has gone on for decades and decades. The status quo has failed all the Palestinian people, and that is why we are seeking a change. So I ask you, Minister, how can you continue on with a failed policy that has failed Palestinians time and time again? Can the government respond to the latest in a decades-long series of violations of international norms and human rights differently? Can you be open to that, Minister, to listen to what we have to say? Ireland, through the prism of the European Union, has significant influence. The EU is Israel's largest single trading partner and has shown a willingness to use trade to positive effects in other situations. So, Minister, I'm asking us to lead Europe, not follow Europe. How will you and Ireland use our influence to effect change at European level, positive change to help to bring justice to the Palestinian people? Can you change your mind, Minister? Can you listen to us? Can you support Senator Black's bill? And it is a modest proposal. It's not radical. And I disagree with Senator Lawless. The Israeli state is very vulnerable to criticism. And it is very, very sensitive to public opinion. And I think what we are doing here will be noted and will be looked at. And therefore, I believe that we are in a position to lead. So, Minister, I'm asking you honestly, and I know you're a man of conviction, to really, really, really take seriously what we have to ask you here. Thank you.
Meantime, I appreciate Senator Lawler allowing his time to move on to others. Senator Norris,
just first of all, I want to put my locus standi on the record of the House. I've been going backwards and forwards to Israel and Palestine for 40 years. I had an apartment in Jerusalem for many, many years, which I shared with my partner, Ezra Yitzhak Nari, who is an Israeli Jewish civil rights activist who has been victimized by the Israeli state for his strong support of the Palestinian people. I'm honored to be a signatory to this bill. I think it's a remarkable initiative, and I hope very much that this bill goes to Dáil Éireann, and that Dáil Éireann has the courage to pass it through and send a direct message to the government. And I would say to the government here today that people all over Europe, people in parliaments all over Europe are watching this debate, and they will take courage from it, and they will pass similar legislation. The Minister says we're not in a position to raise a barrier to declare that goods legally available elsewhere in the EU cannot be. They are not legally available elsewhere, Minister. This is a violation of international law. Importation of goods and services coming from settlements in occupied territories is illegal under international law. And prohibiting trade with settlements does not violate the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, which does not apply in such circumstances. Now, can I say also that people in Israel have signed a letter, very significant people, and they say, as concerned citizens of Israel who wish to live in peace with our neighbours, we once again urge Ireland to support this legislation that will ban trade between Ireland and Israel's illegal settlements in the West Bank. It's signed by Yuri Avnery, Ambassador Professor Eli Barnavi, Ambassador Ilan Baruch, a whole series of ambassadors, Speaker of the Knesset. This is the voice of the real conscience of Israel. And the Minister says we could be a principled voice in the wilderness. Let us be such. The voice in the wilderness was the voice of John the Baptist. And the voice of John the Baptist has rung down through the ages, and it's still heard today. If Ireland accepts this bill, the voice of Ireland will be heard throughout the ages as well. In the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334 of the 23rd of December 2016 reaffirms that the establishment of Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory has no legal validity and that Israel's settlement enterprise is a flagrant violation of international law. It calls upon all states to distinguish in their relevant dealings between the territory of the State of Israel and the territories occupied since 1967. There's our justification from the United Nations itself. Now, the Minister has spoken about very admirable projects. Projects like solar energy. I raised €55,000 to put in solar energy and water treatment plants, and I saw them being demolished bombed by the Israelis. That's what happens. And you talk about the solar energy plant, and you said, as if it was something positive, that it was in Israeli-controlled territory. What do the Israelis do? Every time they feel like it, they switch the electricity off. I've seen pathetic little houses demolished by Israeli bulldozers. I've seen the results of the bombing of hospitals, of schools, of sewage treatment plants. It is appalling. And if you want to know what the people of Palestine, you say that you're speaking on behalf of the people of Palestine. If you want to know what the people of Palestine want, ask the Palestinian farmers in the gallery there, and they will tell you. I surrender my time to my colleagues.